Thanks for coming to the show.
Okay, my pleasure.
How are things?
Good.
I don't mean specifically the script, but when did the subject matter become something that you were interested in telling?
Through the script, actually. I think most people speculate a little bit on the hereafter sometimes, and I think most organized religions certainly believe in it. And I haven't speculated out to any great degree, but then the near-death experiences, I think people report back certain things that seem to be familiar, so that seems to get everybody's curiosity up. And this subject matter that Peter Morgan wrote in the script was the stimulus for the whole thing.
So it wasn't like one of those conversations you'd had with people in your life, and you thought, man, I need to make a film about this.
No, not until I read the whole story, the way he designed it, and the fact that he did kind of a spiritual take without making it necessarily a religious take. It could be, if you wanted it to be that way, that's up to the eyes of the beholder, but this is sort of a spiritual effect, and the reticent hero, which played by Matt, and the people that had various experiences. It's interesting story.
I was thinking, when Invictus was made, you wanted to tell that story because of the way race relations had kind of popped up again in the States, and I wondered if culturally things were happening where you thought this was a relevant time to tell this.
Not necessarily, but what I did, I was interested in the script. He had incorporated real events like the tsunami out in the Pacific 4 years ago, and like the London bombings and all that. And so he had incorporated real events in this what-if story. And that was curiosity for me, but just a general way of the developing the characters and the way they all dealt with it and learned something from it it was important to me.
Is your relationship with the conversation of the hereafter different today than it would have been 4, 5, 10 years ago?
I don't think of it in a conscious way, but I don't think it's too much different.
You become more open to it as time goes on?
I don't know. I mean, I think, I have a friend of mine who's a scientist, and I asked him about it because he wanted to get a scientific point of view. And he says, I don't know, but he says, I was raised with a older sister who's been deceased, and he says, every once in a while I feel her presence there. And he says, there's no discussion or anything, but I just feel that there's her presence there. And I think my mother passed away at 97, about 3 years ago. And every once in a while, you sort of feel the presence, but I don't know whether that's just because you want to feel the presence, or whether somebody is making themselves present. But basically, I've always been a person who I'll believe it if I can see it, but I don't. If you don't see it, if it is, then it's just a thought, a belief.
Well, as your mother was getting older, did she teach you new things about life? Did you pick up traits in her?
Yeah, she did, because I was lucky enough to have her for a long time, and so it was. I watched her change. I watched her, and it made me more conscious of myself changing as time goes on. And so I don't have the exact same points of view as things that I did maybe 30, 40 years ago, but that's good. I think the learning process is what really keeps a person active and keeps a person positive and gives you actually longevity. It's just that you learn something new all the time.
Is that why you shoot so many movies now?
Well, maybe. Yeah.
You've done a lot.
I enjoy making movies, and so that's it. And I see no reason to not continue telling stories until I get to the point where somebody says, "That's enough of him. Get his ass out of here."
I think you've passed the test. So far, you're all right.
So far, I'm knocking on this beautiful upholstery here.
It's nice, eh?
Great stuff.
Got it from your place.
I'll tell you, I should have worn dark glasses for this.
I read that you said you like yourself more now than you did a few years ago, and I wondered what that process was like for you when you went, hey, wait a minute, I like this guy that I didn't like so much then.
Well, I think it's just the maturing process. I think I like it. I think I've been lucky. I've been lucky to be with the right woman, and so I like the situation better. Now, whether that includes myself or not, that's another thing to be discussed. But I think so. I think you become a better person sometimes by your relationships, whether it's to family around you, or children that you have, or spouses, or friends, or what have you.
Well, you have the knack for working with a lot of people that you like, and you're always sort of surrounding yourself with a team. And I wondered, is it the team that, do they make you better? Do they challenge you? I mean, I imagine at a certain point, some people don't want to tell Clint, listen, I think you're doing it wrong. Like, do they push you?
Well, they might not say you're doing it wrong, but you can tell by the look on their face. It's kind of like, oh, you're doing it that way, huh? And you kind of get the picture. But every once in a while they look at me strange, and I go ahead and do it my way anyway. And sometimes you're right, and sometimes you're wrong. I always figure that there's a lot of ways to do certain things, but you have to kind of go with your instincts and go with what your feelings are on a project. Otherwise, you would be in a constant turmoil, and I don't like that. I like to go forward. This is the way. This is my feelings. I've got to go with it.
Are you always confident on a set when you start a project?
Usually, yeah. I mean, I'm confident to some degree. Maybe it's warranted, maybe unwarranted, but you just you have to approach it with a certain amount of confidence. Otherwise, it's going to be a painful sequence for you.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder how you challenge yourself in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
How do you present enough challenges for you so that you can actually not just fall into a habit?
Well, just by basically just attempting new material and material that you haven't done before, and there are various obstacles, dramatic obstacles, or put those before you and tell them as stories. And that's what keeps you fresh on the idea. And that, by dramatic, I mean it could be comedic, or it could be anything. Just a picture like Gran Torino, I use an example. I hadn't planned on acting in a film at that particular time. I thought, well, maybe that's enough of that. But I like the story. I mean, I like the irony of ending up being more of a family to somebody who initially distrust and dislike than it is your own family, and the fact that you're never too old to learn new things.
Do you have to look for something in the character that you can relate to, or in the story that you can relate to tell that story?
As an actor, you're relating to everything anyway. I mean, maybe if you're playing a serial killer, you have to relate to it.
Yeah.
And if you're going to play anything, if you're going to play a guy who's a bigot, you got to relate to it. And if that bigot's going to become a more understanding person through the process of the storytelling, then you have to understand the journey that's going to be taken.
So I found understanding was the word that I kept going back to when I watched Hereafter.
Mm-hmm.
Was the idea that these people just needed somebody to understand,
Mm-hmm.
not just what they were going through, but understand them, and just how challenging it is to find people who can open themselves up to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
You know, and with Matt, he was the guy, because you changed the shooting schedule to get Matt Damon in, didn't you?
Yes, he enjoyed working with me on Invictus, and he said, "I'd like to. How about the next picture?" And I said, "Well, it's a good part, but you're not available." And as I was preparing the picture, I realized that there's, and I'd already, had my mind that I'd be looking for somebody else to fill in. And then all of a sudden I realized, well, wait a second, this is 3 different stories that all converge upon one another, and I can do the other 2 stories, and then do his story later. So we did that. I started in November. I shot the other 2 stories, and then I took a 2-week hiatus at Christmas time and came back and shot with him right afterwards.
What was your backup plan? Did you
There
have
was no backup
You
plan.
had no backup plan? You're going to cast him as Hoover?
I'd love to. I would love to. But I haven't gotten ready to cast Hoover yet. We have one actor who's committed and to do it, and then there's some other very good parts too. But I haven't addressed that yet. I figure I'll do that tomorrow.
when you get to it. Is there a story that you still need to tell? I mean, over your career, you've been able to tell a whole bunch. You've been able to change the sorts of stories.
I don't know if there's a story I've yet to tell, but I will know it when I see it. So it has to be stimulated by the material, and when I see the material and get excited about that, I'll do it. But that's the way I've been all my life. Is just you see the material and the story kind of blooms in front of you, and you get excited about it. But I don't. I'm not searching for any one topic that I can't find a solution to the script on.
Nice. Good to see you. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Really appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Well,
Thank
very
you.
much.
Enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.